All right, let's get into it. Did you know the secret weapon of Star Wars wasn't the Force or a lightsaber? It was a brilliant editor named Marcia Lucas, and honey, she made that galaxy far, far away actually land in our hearts. Hey, it's Emma, and I am in a total vibe mood today. You're listening to Emma Spills the Tea, where we decode pop culture with receipts, feelings, and a little glam, obviously. So, picture this. Marcia Lucas, an American film editor born in the mid-1940s in Modesto, moves to North Hollywood, gets into the Motion Picture Editors Guild, and quietly becomes the person who fixes movies you think are untouchable. We're talking Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, American Graffiti, Taxi Driver. The woman shaped the emotional grammar of New Hollywood. Low-key legendary. Let me set the scene with a quick story from my life. A few years back, I was at this indie film festival in Palm Springs. The movie slated to premiere the next day was in trouble, like stomach drop trouble. The director, who's this rising New York darling, realizes the emotional hinge scene is missing, not just flawed, actually missing. Big yikes. It's 1 a.m., everyone's a hot mess, and then this editor swoops in. Quick definition: a film editor is the person who assembles the shots to make the story sing, pacing, clarity, feeling, all of it. This editor grabs B-roll, steals a reaction shot from a different scene, trims 8 seconds that weren't helping, and, I kid you not, builds the missing emotion out of scraps. The next day, standing ovation, festival award secured. I so cannot explain how fast that turned around.
That was the night I fully got what Marcia Lucas did for cinema, editorial instinct plus timing. If you've ever cheered at a character's last-second comeback or cried when a farewell actually lands, that's an editor saying, "We cut it like this so your heart moves right there." It's the difference between epic and mid. Just saying.
Okay, let's jump to the basics. Marcia starts in the 1960s as an apprentice librarian at Sander Films, which is like trailer and promo central. Cutting trailers is boot camp for rhythm and ruthless choices, and she mastered it. She enters the Editors Guild, grinds for years, and by the early 1970s, she's assisting and then editing the real stuff. Two names you need: Verna Fields, a powerhouse editor famous for Jaws who gave Marcia early mentorship energy, and Francis Ford Coppola, the Godfather director, whose creative circle placed Marcia right where New Hollywood was erupting. Through that circle, she was cutting American Graffiti with George Lucas, who at the time was her husband and, space wizard-in-chief of future Star Wars. American Graffiti earned Marcia an Oscar nomination in the early 1970s, and that's not a courtesy nod. The film's one-night, many-character swirl needed surgical pacing. Then she edited for Martin Scorsese, who, in case anyone just arrived on Earth, is the director behind Taxi Driver and a whole canon of cinephile homework. Taxi Driver got her a BAFTA nomination. Range, honey, from cruising nostalgia to violent psychodrama without blinking. Now, Star Wars, tea time. In 1976, the original editor John Jimson, a British cutter known for a hard day's night, went for a verite looseness that just wasn't clicking. George Lucas, the writer-director, fired him mid-year. Enter Marcia Lucas. George threw her the Death Star trench run, the climax. Industrial Light and Magic, George's effects company, literally waited on her cut to know which shots to build. No pressure. She spent about 8 weeks carving that finale from roughly 40,000 feet of pilot chatter and dogfight footage. Mount Everest in film strips. She imposed geography so you always know where the X-Wings are, pruned dialogue so tactics are clear, and cross-cut to escalate dread. That sequence becomes the template for modern action editing. It's giving clarity, it's giving adrenaline. It's giving yes clean. Then George brought in Richard Chew and Paul Hirsch. Quick IDs. Richard Chew is a sharp narrative surgeon. Paul Hirsch, fresh off Carrie by Brian De Palma, the split-screen king, is timing royalty. Together with Marcia, they rebuilt the first hour and sharpened the escape dogfight. By early 1977, there was a rough cut. Marcia saw it and cried, fearing disaster. And honestly, rough cuts without finished sound or effects can feel like a crime scene. Editors know. They kept working. At a San Francisco test screening at the North Point Theater, Marcia laid down the law. If the audience didn't cheer when Han Solo returns at the last second, the picture didn't work. Audience payoff or bust. Spoiler, we cheered. Star Wars won the editing Oscar in 1977 for Marcia Chew and Hirsch, and the culture started framing it like George is the head and Marcia is the heart. She always pushed back on that label. She said George imagined the world, the names, the story. She made scenes work emotionally. Both things can be true. Also, shout out to SF Gate in 2021 for calling her the secret weapon of Star Wars, because receipts. Okay, pause, because this next part is everything. Marcia reportedly advised during the Star Wars drafting that Obi-Wan Kenobi should die so he could guide Luke spiritually. Translation: kill your mentor to elevate the myth. That single note bursts the Force Ghost idea and lands Luke's arc in full Campbell vibed. That's not a small tweak, that's structural soul. And it wasn't just Star Wars. In 1981, after a Raiders of the Lost Ark rough cut, she told Steven Spielberg, who is, hello, the blockbuster whisperer, that the ending needed Marion back for emotional closure. Spielberg shot a new final scene in San Francisco. Suddenly, the movie said, we didn't just end a plot, we completed a relationship. That's Marcia's calling card. Finish the feeling, not diss the chase. On Return of the Jedi in the early 1980s, George tapped her for the dying and crying scenes. As he put it, she threaded the farewells, the redemptions, the beats your inner child still carries. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, life is life. She and George split in the early 1980s, reportedly with a massive settlement, and they shared custody of their daughter Amanda, whom they adopted in 1981. Hollywood isn't just stories on screen, it's people negotiating love, power, and legacy in real time. Side note, I adore, she also helped design the interiors of Lucas's creative spaces, like the Egg Company building on Lancashire. Dark green walls, burnished wood, antique desks. It's giving classic library chic. She literally built rooms where stories could be made. The woman edited films and vibes. Now, the big unanswered question fandom loves to debate. Why did Marcia leave Star Wars before the very end of Coast? Two stories. 1. It was a planned handoff around Thanksgiving 1976 because she needed to edit Scorsese's New York, New York. 2. It was an emergency near Christmas because Irving Lerner, a veteran editor on that film, died mid-process and they needed Marcia to step in. For context, Scorsese is the director and Lerner was the editor, whose passing created a crisis. My take? Eileen emergency! Hollywood schedules are chaos, and when an editor of Lerner's stature dies mid-cut, the call goes to someone who can land the plane under fire. That's Marcia! Also, Star Wars had a 3-editor team by then, with George supervising, so it tracks that she could bail to fix New York, New York, while Chew and Hirsch kept the engines hot. Either way, she still owns that trench run and the film's heartbeat. The credits and the Oscar agree. Culturally, her fingerprints are everywhere, killing Obi-Wan to deepen the myth, editing the trench run into the modern action blueprint, calling the Han Solo cheer moment like a coach drawing the game winner. And later in life, she did not hold back about Star Wars entries she felt missed the mark. In film historian Jay West, Riesler's final book about producer Howard Kazanjian, she criticized The Phantom Menace and later sequels for choices that, in her view, broke emotional logic. Love it or hate it, that's an editor's compass talking. Motivation, clarity, payoff. And because life writes the hardest scenes, we lost Marcia in 2026 at age 80 after cancer. I hate that, but I love that the reassessment is finally loud. She wasn't just George's partner or Scorsese's editor. She was a craft leader who set the emotional standard for blockbusters. Women in film have always been there. The industry is just, catching up with the credits. Okay, let's move on to the takeaway. If you're a creator, remember the Marcia rule. Don't just resolve the plot, complete the feeling. That's how a movie graduates from content to culture, from weekend box office to living rent-free in our heads for decades. Next time, we have to talk another unsung hero, Verna Fields, the editor, nicknamed Mother Cutter, the steady hand behind Jaws. If you've ever been scared of the water, she probably cut that fear into you. We're spilling that tea soon. So, that's the tea, folks. We covered a lot, and I want to hear your takes. Drop me your favorite Marcia moment. Until next time, stay iconic.